Bermuda has at least 21 freshwater, brackish, and saltwater ponds spread throughout the islands that have been restored over the past 50 years. These ponds are vital to our natural environment and provide a habitat for a multitude of species. Dr. David Wingate was the conservation officer for the Bermuda Government Parks Department for 34 years until his retirement in 2000. He's best known for his work with the cows, but was also instrumental in constructing and restoring many of the island's ponds. We met Dr. Wingate at Somerset Long Bay, and he explained the process of restoring the two ponds there.
It was still a public garbage dump. And you see, all of this area back in the beach was a marsh going quite far in, across the road, and quite far in. You can see how low-lying it is. And over the decades, it had been filled in one way or another. But when the government started the policy of dumping in the marshes, their goal was sort of twofold. First of all, a place to get rid of garbage where nobody appreciated the value of marshland, and secondly, a way to control mosquitoes, because people didn't value marshland because it bred mosquitoes, and no one appreciated the nature side of conservation. So they just started this policy of control mosquitoes by filling in the marshes. And as the population grew and they got more efficient at garbage disposal, it increased and increased. So I came in towards the tail end of that, and I remember seeing this place where they were just filling this last section here, and they completely filled it right over to the other side. And the only thing that they filled around the black mangroves here, so there were isolated islands of mangroves sticking up, through the garbage. But you could imagine what it was like with bottles and cans, and absolutely awful. Yeah. And then it would be burnt, and of course that made the place. No one thought of it as a park.
Here, Dr. Wingate explains how the Bermuda Audubon Society restored the ponds at Somerset Long Bay.
This is one I distinctly remember. I do remember Collector's Hill Pond as well. And so when Audubon, the one beauty of it was that the land was so regarded as so valueless that we either got it given or we got it very cheaply. And so that was when Audubon started to buy up marshlands for nature reserves. And I knew they were restorable, so I said, well, let's buy them real cheap. Some people just give it to us. And Geoffrey Pittman gave us that over there, or almost gave it to us. He gave it to us very cheap. I think there were two owners here, and we had to pay, I don't know, a few $1,000. It really wasn't much. So it was my first experiment at digging, and the idea was that the garbage was a fairly thin layer on the top of the peat marsh. So this pond was not, it was more like a mangrove swamp. It wasn't that deep. When they filled it with garbage, of course, it raised it about 2-3 feet, and there was a little bit of settling into the peat. Okay, so my rationale was that if we got the biggest backhoe we could, that's the ideal machine, with a track hoe really, because wheels mire down in the stuff. So it was a track hoe with a big bucket, and we started in the middle and worked our way back, leaving the islands, the mangroves as islands, and brought it all back to create more of a berm between the beach and the pond. And you can see the berm here, which is probably a little bit higher than what the beach berm was at the time. So there was less likelihood of flooding and hurricanes. So that was a help to the community. And the idea was to dig deeper than the garbage layer and turn the whole thing over so that the garbage was then on the bottom with the peat and the soil on top. And while there was an awful lot of mixing that went on, there was a heck of a lot less garbage, at the end of the job. than there would be. And as you see, since then, we've been able to pick the bottles out, and the cans, of course, rusted out.
We asked Dr. Wingate how many ponds he's been involved with in constructing and restoring throughout the island.
21 ponds of one type or another that I've been responsible for digging either through Audubon, the National Trust, or the Government Conservation Officer. And they're basically of two different types. The totally artificial ones. The ones that I've showed you here are the excavated restoration of garbage dumps. So restoring amounts that were spilled in garbage. But they tend to be, for the most part, deeper than they were, because before they might just be the shallow marsh with vegetation all across, you know. Yeah. But I knew that in order to maintain them as open water, I'd have to make them deep enough so things like cowcane and Napier grass could be conveyed. So that's one unfortunate change that we can't really do anything about, and that's a big loss for certain types of waterfowl, for the things like sorrel rails and the rails that like to go through shallow, wet, marshy ground, and snipe. But it's more beneficial to ducks and to moorhens, and to a great extent herons, because the open water goes right up near the shore and they can perch on branches. And I think that's one factor that enabled the green heron to establish and become so dominant.
We asked Dr. Wingate what the future expectations for the ponds are at Somerset Long Bay. He also mentioned the successes of the three main ponds at Spittal Pond, where he was personally involved in constructing the two smaller ponds.
If you want to see what this will look like later on, just walk through the woods by the woodland pond. It's beautiful right now with the hackberry and palmettos are really tall. Anyway, the other one, the more open one, is pure fresh water, because we excavated into red clay and we didn't know what we were going to get. But the woodland pond is actually brackish due to cave connection. Yeah. So we got three totally different ponds there. There's one by spillover flooding only, which would otherwise be fresh. There's a woodland pond which is slightly tidal, brackish. And then there's the freshwater pond, and that's why Spittal Pond is so wonderfully diverse now. You know, it's an example of maximizing the potential of a nature.
Bermuda's ponds need to be recognized as important features and maintained for future generations. The best way to do this is through education, and this needs to be started at an early age.